Grief and how grief can block joy, progress, and growth, and many, many more things. I want to talk about this today and my story around grief and working through it. Welcome to the Men's Mental Health Podcast. Now, I've just come back from an amazing retreat, absolutely outstanding. And before this, I was in California for a deep diving event as well. And in these things, we really go deep with various tools, various resources, various communities, and allow not just to go into the head, because that's very surface level in terms of what's in the conscious mind, but go deeper in terms of what might be in the subconscious mind, and even deeper than that, right? And there's a lot of healing done in that process. Now, healing has not always been my favorite word because people overuse it and people use it, I feel, in my view, and I've done it, to just put off doing things. It's like, I don't want to go out and do this because I'm healing. I don't want to do that because I'm healing. Now, if something dramatic or traumatic has just happened to you, of course, you're going to need some space, right? If someone's just dumped you, your marriage has ended, your relationship's ended, you've had a divorce, you've just lost someone to death, you got to feel those things 100%, right? But I've seen people years later down the line being like, yeah, I'm just not ready to date yet, or I'm just not ready to do that next thing because I'm still hurting for that thing a few years ago. And I'm not saying like some things are going to stay with you for life and, you're always going to feel into them in some ways. Like there's people I've lost who always be in my heart, right? But it's like healing can hold a lot. Healing doesn't hold us back, but using the excuse healing is, I feel like, very used very commonly. So really, I think, feeling into our emotions is key. But one thing I learned for me is even though I take the action, I also feel into the emotion. And one thing I've learned that I need to process even more is grief. Grief in particular for me has been the loss of lots of relatives when I was younger. And I need to feel into that more because there's certainly like blockages in my life that I'm working through. Clarity sometimes on the way I'm going. Sometimes like emotions like anger, like anxiety will pop up just from hardly anything. Now, not like everything, I've really worked on my emotions so that I can feel through things. But I've been in a point where like anger or anxiety would come when someone would prod in the slightest emotional wound. And a lot of that has been unprocessed grief, because grief can really create a lot of dark energy I found inside of me. And when I've done deep diving things with various tools, various resources, I found that actually the cause of a lot of my emotional chaos has been grief. And grief is releasing things you lost, and it doesn't, for me, that's what it means. And for me, it's not just about like people you lose to death. Now that can be a very big thing in grief, obviously, if you lose someone, but it could also be loss of situations, loss of relationships, all these kind of things. And for me, when grief really came out, bizarrely, like when I've lost family members, and even when I was 20 and into my later 20s and losing grandparents, I lost a lot of relatives when I was younger, but in my 20s, I lost both my other grandparents when I was 20 and 26. Granddad and grandma, and I didn't even really feel much, and that's because I'd like numbed out from feeling grief, because from such a young age I detached from feeling that. And when I've worked through and done like things like breath work or other forms, it's really allowed me to get emotional and release it and feel a lot lighter. I've done things like massage, like dance, all these somatic exercises, really, really powerful for feeling into grief, and it's made me tear up emotionally and shake it out other kind of ways. But then I feel a lot lighter and I can bring a lot more joy. And actually holding on to grief can block a lot of joy. Holding on to grief, like a loss of relationship or something like that on the dating relationship area, like I've held on to resentment and like frustration over the person, over the woman, but in the back of my mind, even though I'm not have like expressed that outwardly. And that's blocked like a lot of joy. And that's kind of like a form of grief. But when I've like released that, like whether it's like anger through music or whatever form, breathing it out, it's allowed me to free up a lot more and be in a much more loving place for myself and other people. So I wanted to talk about grief really. And yeah, I want to touch on this because I think particularly men, we're not taught how to feel our emotions. So I want to give some tips and things that work for me. And I feel for me, grief has been a big thing that stopped my growth. Like, because I'm so numb, I can't feel deeper. When I can't feel deeper, I can't process things as much or be as present or as focused or as productive. And that's what grief stops. Like, having grief for me, like unprocessed grief and not being able to process it, stops me from being healthier, like emotionally, physically in some cases, because it can get like you can get tension in the body. With relationships, not just the intimate relationships, all kind of relationship, grief can impact on that because you're not able to be present and you've got these negative emotions with you. And then certainly in like business and making money, career, all those kind of things, you're less productive because like there's grief there and it's draining you in the background. Now, some people use work as a distraction, but working too much can be unhealthy, right? So I think it's really important to process grief in those cases. Men might think, oh, I don't want to feel emotions, oh, that's soppy. But actually, if it's going to make you, for me, it's going to make me more improved in terms of my health, wealth, and relationships. I want to process grief, even if it's difficult at first, right? So here's some things that have worked. Number one, find your time to feel. They say there's a great phrase that goes, feel to heal, and I think that's very true. Schedule some time in the feel, like if it's your morning routine or if it's at night or it's you want to do a longer session at the weekend. I would do it daily, right? Now, if you're in a place where you're feeling really good, you do it. Like I like to feel how I'm feeling anyway. Even if I'm feeling neutral, I'll be like, I'm feeling very relaxed today. And connecting with the body is really, really key. So number one, schedule time to feel. Number two, breath work is key to working through grief. Because what breath work does is it gets you beyond your mind. It gets you into your body, and your body stores a lot of emotions. So if you can breathe into something deep and heavy, it'll allow your sympathetic nervous system to let go of some tension, and then your parasympathetic nervous system, when you breathe, you do that kind of breathing, because you can do two types of breath work. Sympathetic breathing, which allows you to activate into heightened emotions to release them. That's when you're in your fight or flight response place, but that's also a way you can release things when you do that. But also parasympathetic breathing, which is when you breathe just to relax and calm your nervous system again. So I recommend doing that every day as well. Number three is, so I've talked about time to feel, breath work. Number three is, communicate it. Now, what does communicate mean? It can mean talking it through with someone, but what I found is super, super helpful. I would do that, recommend that. That's why I think like talking to people is key, but find someone you can trust. But have a conversation with yourself, but a part of you. Now, for me, I have a conversation with either my grandma or my brother, who are sadly no longer with us. Unfortunately, my brother died when he was a baby, but they're like part of me. They're things that I lost in my life. So when I have a conversation with them, it's like talking to the grief and having a healthy relationship with myself, or my inner child, me at 3 years old, who may be a bit upset from those losses. So if you can communicate to yourself or parts of you or past relatives, you may or may not believe in this stuff, but it's like having a conversation with yourself, but a deeper part of yourself, right? So just try it, have a conversation with someone who's maybe passed away and, feel like they're part of you, because that can be a really healthy way to kind of process it. I have conversations with my brother like daily now, right? And then number four, I recommend finding some kind of expert. I've learned from some people who are very good at processing emotions, and I taken it into my life. But yeah, find an expert on grief, someone who's very good at like working through it. Obviously, don't just listen to someone who talks a good game but doesn't do any work. listen to someone who's got expertise, whether it's a podcast, whether it's actually getting yourself a coach or going to a program. David Kessler is a good one that's recommended to me often. I've got someone who I have the privilege of actually working with who's very good at processing emotions, and I've read a lot of her works, implemented a lot of hers, do her breathwork regularly. But yeah, finding yourself an expert to really process grief as well. So that's what I really wanted to talk about on grief today, because I think it's really, really key to mental health and also moving forward. Because if you've got stuff blocking you from feeling those joy, from feeling that productivity, it's going to impact your life. And that's just my personal take on it. Again, as always, in this episode, take what you want, feel into what you want. But if you feel like there's just emotions that are going round and round, probably at the core of it is grief or trauma. Now, we won't go into trauma today. They can be very close, but grief is like the loss of something and you've not quite processed it. And it may take time as well. That's a really important point before I close out, actually. You may think, I'll do one big relief and it'll go. No, in my opinion, that can really, really help and shift things, but it can be a gradual process. You could just be breathing into your heart, not feeling it, might be closed, and then you've done it, and then a couple of weeks later, I'm not going to put a timeline on it for how long it's going to take you to feel, because there is none. But like, if you keep consistently breathing into parts of your body that need attention that are maybe holding on to that grief, chances are, wow, very, very high chances are you're going to actually release it at some point. But again, this is why it's key to have support with you as well when you're working into grief. So that's what I really wanted to talk about grief today. So thank you for listening. And remember to lead with your heart, not with fear.